My suggestion is to pick a single pilot area or a particular service or, a particular process. Some of the things I've outlined here, which we've already covered, center around, branch teller transactions, the lending processes. And again, these obviously pertain to financial institutions, capacity planning, help desk, IT application, human resources. There are a lot of different areas that really lend themselves towards process review. Developing a better understanding of the member experience. I mentioned it before that it is the perception of the value from the member's perspective. So if we looked at that typical call into the member service call center, out of that 127 potential steps, and let's say the member was calling in to get the balance information or to complete a simple transfer, the one thing that adds value from their perspective is completing the transaction or getting their balance information. The other 120 steps, or 126 steps, I should say, then become available for review for process improvement. So again, understanding it from the member's perspective is critical. And in most processes, there's usually only one or two steps that actually add value. Eliminate the low-hanging fruit with simple creativity. In most of these events that we've held and process reviews that have been completed, we have not normally allowed technology to be used as a quick, fast solution. And the reason is until you've actually examined the process, throwing technology at it can only make a bad process potentially go faster. So we prefer to use, creativity in addressing a potential issue before we start looking at a longer-term solution as it relates to technology. As I've mentioned before, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. It's very important to understand what it is that you are trying to correct, but understand what the current environment is. Gathering information, such as volume or timing a transaction, although it's not the most comfortable thing to do in the world when you're stood behind someone with a stopwatch, it is important in being able to understand exactly how long something takes. And then expanding beyond pilots, as I've mentioned in the last three examples, we started off small and we kind of worked our way out. And I think one of the most important things, which I really haven't touched on, is that the cultural change that's involved. Empowering these teams to make the decision is important. But it also involves a cultural change from the top down in how an organization perceives itself and or perceives their own processes. And that is extremely important. So with that being said, I know we have a few minutes, Melissa, for questions.
Yes, thank you, Peter. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A session, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area in the bottom corner of your screen and click the Submit button. So we'll try and cover just a couple questions here real quick before we're out of time. Peter, the first question comes from Jonathan, and he would like to know, after you did each of the Kaizen events, how did you make sure the changes stuck and people didn't revert back to the way they used to do things?
That's a very good question, Jonathan. As I mentioned before, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. One of the primary tools that we use in going into an event is to obtain baseline metrics. As I mentioned before, it could be transactional volumes that you already have access to, or it may be that you need to gather this information by hand ahead of the event. The importance in that is you know where you started from, and once you've completed the event, you go back and you remeasure. How do you make sure that, people don't slip back and or the process goes back to the way it used to be done? We actually make this part of a management reporting process, and every event that we have done, we add to this dashboard, and it's provided to not only the CEO, to the senior staff on a monthly basis. And that's important because the process improvement department reviews these numbers very carefully. And if they see any change, which would be out of normal variation, then they can go back and review to make sure that the process is still consistent and or is still the way that it was originally placed.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that came in related to the Kaizen events. Michael would like to know, how did you identify the participants for the 5-day Kaizen?
We actually did it very loosely. We didn't want to specifically identify certain people. We left it up to the department managers, and we just gave them general criteria. So, for example, if we did an event in the records and research area, we knew we would need at least 2 senior folks from that area that understood the records and research processes. But then we would go to operations or lending or one of the back office functions and say, do you have someone you can give us for a week that's been here less than 6 months? Or from operations perspective, could we have 2 of the branch folks that deal with the records and research department at least 2 to 3 times a day? And so the idea is they gave us folks from different branches, different areas, and different roles, and different experience levels within the credit union. And the purpose behind that was to get as many different perspectives in one room as possible.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time for any additional questions. Thank you again for your interest and interaction during our Q&A session. And if you have additional questions or want to speak to somebody in more detail, please contact Guidon at 480-986-4414. And the email address and website are also up on the screen there. And we will be sure to get you in touch with the right person to answer your questions. So thank you very much, Peter. This wraps up our web seminar, and I hope everyone has a great day.